Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Fight Chat Friday from TKD Coach Academy. This week we are back at the ATF European Championships, coming from Lublin in Poland, and we're going to have a look at the minus 63 kilo final. This is between Bahaa from Spain and Ziga Zogoranski from Slovenia. Expecting a really high tempo match, plenty of activity, plenty of excitement in this one. And ahead of this one, Richie, you'd circulated a poll just to generate, I suppose, a little bit of commentary. What was that about?
Yeah, so last week we did have our video and there was some comments and some suggestions about potentially with refereeing and stoppages, etc., warnings, the whole lot. Would it be possible to have some stoppages? So you guys have said it's like an L stance, it's 70-30.
Yeah.
So that's the votes on that with 115 votes. We will have a chat about it at the end of this video to give our views and ideas on it. Some good, some bad. But we will get stuck into it. It's kind of clear that you guys are in agreement of this, where possible, of course. But maybe we'll have a more in-depth chat about that and our thoughts later after the 63 final.
Okay, so without any further ado, let's just jump right into that one and have a quick look at this action. So we have Ziga in blue from Slovenia, Bahaa in red from Spain. Worked out really well for the country colours there as well.
Yeah, ideal. So this one is in the finals gala, so you're expecting a good fight here. They don't put them on expecting it to be a quiet one, and certainly wasn't. There was lots of high action. We'll see that in the stats later. A lot of action for the return as well, so that's something that we will chat about. But Bahaa just up from the junior ranks. He was in the final of the Worlds, I think, in his division as a junior, and has pulled through to the final here in his first senior event, which is definitely something to admire. Some really good top people in that 63 division and some big names as well to get all the way to the final. So right off the bat, we see Ziga coming over the top with the clash. We do notice that when he does like the clash, the knee is a bit higher than here. So when we see him lead off with his side kick or his carry, the knee isn't as high. But his chamber is vicious. If you think you're going to read it come through, the side kick comes over the top. Very, very effective. And we see somehow the scores are coming back here, which I don't see how, but we might have a look at that in depth later.
No, absolutely agree with you there. I think what's really interesting from both competitors just at the start of this match as well is that they're not really allowing for a build-up of momentum or a build-up of, we'll say, control of the ring space. So if someone invades into the space, yes, they're willing to give up ground a little bit, but they're immediately the one who is coming back and putting on that return pressure. Both of them have a good enough understanding of their distance to not end up accidentally in contact. So they're having to draw the other person in or make a longer commitment into the lead leg attack to bring it into contact. And we've seen those two examples so far where Ziga has mixed things up a little bit, used the clash or used the signal or the intention to lift that front leg to get himself into hands. And it's been, we'll say, on the surface of it, quite effective, if not getting the same return on the scoreboard.
Yeah, so it's a lot of carries in this fight. We see a lot of empty carries to set up things. Ziga is looking for his direct side kick and his hacks off his carry, where it seems to be that Bahaa is looking for his turning kicks and variations to come underneath from the carry where possible, and also his blitz. So we'll see that later on here again. Bahaa gets a return here for the second shot off his backhand after this clash. So again, it alludes to the idea we spoke about last week, is reverse point sparring becoming more popular. In this last little clip, we see a test step and some entries for Bahaa trying to get to that blitz. I think that if you're a more experienced fighter like Ziga is, and he's been around the block, he's experienced and he knows what that test step means. So we'll see some examples later where Bahaa goes to the blitz more direct without the test step to set it up, and that actually tends to be a little bit more successful for him. So we'll see that later on.
Yeah, we did see a nice defensive side kick on the exit, which is something that we don't usually see Ziga throwing because he's so often on the front foot. So that does speak to the kind of spatial pressure that Bahaa is putting on. He is invading the space. He is staying highly active off that front leg. And that does mean that, we get to see a defensive side to Ziga, which we don't often see.
Yeah, I really like the way that he goes direct with the side kick as well, Ziga, where Bahaa, in this example, his carry is the same as his side kick. And I think it's more effective if you can have a variety to both. James Chute is another example. His carry off his front leg is different to his direct side kick. Whereas if your carry and your direct side kick are the same, it can be a little bit more predictable. And we can see he's not able to get the same purchase as Ziga is getting with his direct side kick. It's more of a stabbing direct shot, and it's just a clearer and it's more of a stopping shot as well off that side kick. So I think it's a little bit better.
We saw a little return for Ziga there again, slipping the side kick in under the front elbow. And, right across the tournament, we hadn't seen a lot of that. There's another really nice side kick score, but that one was really quite obvious because he kind of speared Bahaa on the end of it. But we hadn't seen many of the side kicks, would say the more tenuous ones, just creeping in under the arm and onto the hip, getting a return. But one just a moment ago there from Ziga getting a return on the scoreboard.
Yeah, Ziga's stepping on his legs, like on his kick. Sorry, it's not something you teach people to do, but he does it to mess people up and to create an unusual rhythm, and it's so effective. Again, I already mentioned James. He's another guy who does this really well. He's able to step and create varieties to, like, you don't know whether it's coming over the top, whether it's direct, and they step on their kicks really, really well. So it's a good way to create a little bit of alleviate some pressure. So some people use carries to do it, but you can step and move that back foot in a bit tidier and set it underneath, see, like here, and that's able to set your foot underneath you a bit closer, which allows you to launch even closer to the fighter again. So it messes up the perception of the distance a little bit, and it's very, very effective.
Yeah, the other thing it lets them do as well is between the direct front leg carries, the step and lifts, and the trampoline shots, we're seeing quite a bit of variation in the length of the stance that the eventual attack or kick is starting from. And that, the stance should give you some clues about the range the person can take. And Ziga, between the steps, the direct carries, and so on, brings in enough variation that it's very difficult to be able to predict whether he's going to be able to go for a longer shot or not, which is why he very often does catch people with that front leg hacks.
Yeah, so right here, if we pause for a second, Adrian.
Absolutely.
So we can see the scoreboard here. We have a 4-4 and a 6-4 as well in favor of Bahaa, and the other one is 7-6. The 8-4 is out of contention, let's say, but this fight, 32 seconds left, is up for grabs. We have
it's a 1-point
Bahaa
game.
It's a 1-point game. His third warning here is on the fences. It could come up. Ziga is a little bit more comfortable on his third, so he has some leeway there. But this fight, like, visually so far, it has been a little bit different to what you might see on the scoring, but it's very, very close. And that's not how it ends up in the end, and it's a clear 4-0. But we can see here, with 32 seconds left, this is a very vital point in the fight for you to make correct decisions. So what we're looking for here is Bahaa to maybe get what he was successful with. And for me, it wasn't using that test step and the blitz, and it wasn't using the turning kick too well. So ideally, you want to avoid that. And for Ziga, he's been able to use his front leg and his clashing really, really well, and to pull him in to lower him to side kick. So we'll see how it goes last 32 seconds.
All right, jumping right back into it. And a good moment actually there to pause and think and have a moment to go, okay, what do I need to do from here? So let's see what Bahaa does try to do. So he's looking at those kind of shorter carries, or the carries that drop into a short stance and lift again. But a little bit of the liveliness is gone from the front leg at the moment.
Yeah, so he's using that test step again, which I think is very effective against other fighters, but it hasn't been working too well, or the turning kick so far. And they're things I would be avoiding. It's not been working very well for you in this fight. Go back to the well and then bang over the top when you're trying to set that up. Ziga is able to capitalize, and then that's it, fight over. So it's only a couple of seconds left and 1 second left, and we'll see what happens here now in the last second. Another one again, so it just puts it to bed. So you can see, like, looking at the scoreboard here now, it looks like a very clear, handy win for Ziga, but that wasn't the case with 32 seconds left. So that's a very important takeaway here to pull from this fight. You need to be able to have your go-to shots and your strategy nailed down. What has been working for me so far? What has not been working for me up in this fight? Because as we've seen from a lot of chat so far about the Euros, rings differ and the umpires differ. So these are not particularly the same umpires that he's had through his preliminary rounds. So maybe his current strategy isn't going to be effective. So you need to have a plan B as well. So that's very, very important.
Yeah, just wanted to point out in this last little element here where Ziga has been very, very effective in denying Bahaa what he clearly wants. Like, Bahaa is using all of those test steps. It looks like he wants to go to hands. And Ziga is doing a very, very good job of keeping the distance different, keeping that front leg busy and light. And there are subtle changes of angle as well and distance, so that it's making it very, very difficult for Bahaa to get that, we'll say that one test step where Ziga is giving ground that lets him take the blitz, or where Ziga doesn't respond. So there is a response to everything, and what Ziga, I think, has done very well in that 20-second spell there is make sure that he's the one who's controlling the distance and tempo of the engagement.
Yeah, I really loved the second last one where he got the axe pulled out and wasn't happy to celebrate that. He went straight into the blitz again. Love that. That's a sign of really high level. But yeah, I think really, really good from both guys. What we do see as well in that last little exchange is obviously the stack of the chips were in Ziga's favor because Baha had to come to him and he had that nice spare sidekick that he's been using throughout the fight that he could rely on, and maybe he was putting that up to have it in the mind of Baha and then switch over the top with the hacks. So that's the variation that you have, and having that in the toolbox is great as well. So you need to have a little bit of variety off your carries. I think if we go into the stats now, we'll see it, visually you don't notice it, but the amount of carries in this fight was phenomenal.
Yeah, we're looking at
And
nearly
as we
100 carries between the two guys. It's a huge number.
massive, and we can see like there wasn't a lot of exits. So what was the purpose of the carries? It was either to change rhythm or to sway a little bit of momentum. It certainly wasn't to build pressure towards the edge of the ring from what we can see. And one other benefit that you can get from the carry, of course, is to disguise that back leg being snuck in underneath you a little bit tighter, which Ziga in particular is really effective with. He's able to use that carry to pull his back leg in underneath and then ideally come over the top with the hacks because his balance is very much centered then because of that as well. So that's what we see. Lots and lots of carries. I think, as we alluded to, the turning kicks and the hands is what Baha was looking to get from the carries. And we have the more direct side kicks and hands and axe as well from Ziga. So that's kind of what he was trying to pull off from the carries as well. So it's very, very important not just to have a carry and an empty carry and nothing else after that. You need to understand what's going to be after that and what is your game plan. After you get a little bit of momentum, what's going to be the next shots or the next techniques or the next sequences that you're going to try to build from there.
So we can see that Baha got contact 22 times after 72 attempts. So you get 24 contacts after 86 attempts. So we're seeing a particularly low contact rate from both fighters. They had to work very, very difficult to pull their opponent into contact, and they had to work at a very, very high rate. So we're looking at one contact every 11 seconds for Baha and once every 10 for Ziga. So not a huge difference in terms of their contact or the contact rate. Warnings very, very, very low. 13 restarts. That's bang on average. So we're looking at a kind of a match where that high tempo and the really good control of distance from both guys kept the contact rate low for both, but they had to work very, very hard to achieve even that contact rate.
Yeah, and it's even more like a mental focus that's very important there as well, because when the action is so intense, you need to be tuned in at all times. And like we seen, the warnings weren't very high. I know there wasn't many exits, but there wasn't many like things for clashing, whatever as well, and that allowed the fight even to have a nice flow. So credit to
Yeah,
the referee. We're quick to pull up when things don't go so well. So credit to the referee on that one. Made the fight enjoyable to watch.
absolutely. So again, we were saying that until that last 30 seconds, this looked very, very, very different. But we can see that, by the end of it, there was an average flag score, quite a high scoring match in that sense, 5.25 for Baha and 9.5 for Ziga. And then we're looking at a 4.25 point differential or safety margin. Similar number of techniques. We saw that Ziga had more sidekick and hacks, and that Baha had the blitz and he was trying to kick a little bit more, but just in not having the hacks and maybe the sidekick so much, a little less variety for him. Really, really big differences there in terms of in particular, the first into contact, where often it was Ziga who interrupted the rhythm and got into contact first. That said, we did again see in this one a lot of reward from the four corners
Absolutely.
for that last defining point, or the one on the exit, which I suppose in so many ways is easier to see.
Yeah, I think that's what kept Baha in this so long. As we see down the end, decision flips 5. So it's not like Ziga had all his own way the whole fight. There was 5 times that the decision flipped over back and forth, which, as we said, one flag in play at the end, but that wasn't the really telling story of the fight. There's 2 big head kicks there in the last 10 seconds. So 16 exchanges, and if you're being first in only 5 and you're still in contention with the decision of the fight with the last 30 seconds, and you're only first to contact in 5 of those 16, it does kind of allude to that the preference for referees and scoring at the moment is very much towards that last defining shot. If you can be the last in contact, that's definitely a big factor at the moment. Obviously, if you're getting a very clear, direct first shot, that's clear. and
Yeah.
it's easy for referees to see. But when it's maybe not a clear one and it's just getting into contact as the opponent is coming into contact also, it's not that clear of a score, and then we're getting the return most of the time for the big exclamation point at the end.
So just in terms of the overall control of the match, you can see both guys did phenomenally well. Both guys were fighting for the middle, very few exits, no falling down. A couple of clashes, nothing too noticeable from the warnings of fouls. Certainly no fouls. So both had very good control of their distance. It was difficult for each of them to bring the other person into contact. Their control of the ring, again, generally quite good. If they were getting towards the back edge of the ring, they were taking positive steps, taking control of the match once again. And in terms of that intensity, while it was really quite high, I do think as well there were moments in it where Ziga got the edge. So in particular, being able to deny Bahaa that option or that opportunity to make a test step and get into the blitz, particularly in that last 20 to 30 seconds. I think that was very, very important. So maybe you give a slight edge to Ziga in terms of the control of the tempo and intensity over the course of the match. Do you want to go back to that poll and say a little something then
just before we finish up on this one, we can leave this visual up, it's okay. But we're just a little point on this. I was watching this fight from the stands, and visually for me, I didn't see the scoreboard from where I was sitting, and to me it looked like Ziga was controlling the fight throughout. So it's very interesting as well. Like maybe you can go back and watch this without the volume, without the scoreboard, maybe if possible, and without us talking over if you're watching this video, and just see for yourself what do you think. So it's very, very interesting that like what you visually think is working, or like somebody's control visually, isn't always the way because of the way the game works and way scoring works and things like that. So it is important to be able to stick yourself in the fight and still give your opponent trouble and still put your best foot forward essentially and give them things to deal with all the time, because even though it might visually look like someone is really cruising and in control of the fight, it's not always the way on the scoreboard. So I think that's an important takeaway as well.
Absolutely. So back over here, this was the poll that we put up there, and it was talking about the idea of, do we have to stop the match every time a warning is given? And obviously there's a preference there from the 115 respondents that, look, if we can interrupt the match as little as possible, I think that's the general sense that you'd be getting from people's opinions there. So I think the real question is, Richie, what do you think in terms of how it might be done? How would you stop the match less while not changing the rules necessarily in terms of the warnings that are given?
Well, first of all, my spelling there is what I'm worried about at the moment. And my grammar, forget about that. Anyway, so like the big thing for me would be like, how is this done? Because there's the negatives for me, first of all. Let me start with those. If it's done in a situation where, okay, I kick low towards you, Adrian, a little bit below the belt, no real injury or no real need to stop the fight, where we continue fighting, but the referee says that was a low kick and indicates to the center referee, that's a warning, which whatever signal he may want to do with that, whether he has a blue armband on him and a red armband and he lifts one of them in the air, I don't know. But then what might happen there is we're not really learning as fighters in there. When you're in the situation and you get a warning, it's okay, yeah, I kicked low there. I need to be careful of this because the referee is going to be on top of that if I do it again. So the learning for you and your adaptability in the ring is a little bit more tricky with this. And also, I think another issue is potentially the accountability for the referees, because when the match is stopped and they give a warning for whatever they may give it for, if the coach doesn't agree, usually they will signal and they might throw their hands in the air. They might have a little bit of discontent in some way. And then it's a little bit clearer, okay, like whereas if the referee is seeing it a different way and their interpretation of the rules and they continue to give that warning, because the fight is continuing and you're looking at the scoreboard as a coach and you're looking at the fight as a coach, you might not be able to have the opportunity, let's say, to be able to kind of process all of that, why it was happening, and disagree with it or whatever it may be. So they would be the two negative reasons for me. Of course, the positives would be to have natural flow. That's something that we're looking for more in ITF. It's only a 4-minute fight and not all of that is spent fighting, so we would like a little bit more of that. And of course that links in then to the momentum that people can gain as well, which we've seen in our last episode 188, that that was something a little bit interrupted from the fighters there. and the time and the clock is another factor as well. So we're looking, as we said, to be able to maximize the full 4 minutes of actual flow and actual ITF fighting. So as the more we can get that, the better. So I think there's plus and minus on both sides, like there is with everything. I wouldn't be, if I was thinking about it, I don't know would I be going for the yes, and I don't know is that clear of a 70%, 30% in my mind that I'd be going for that. It's kind of more of a 50-50, and I would probably be leaning towards the no for the reason that I said earlier.
So in very, very typical me fashion, I read the question and then thought of a different question and answered the other question. So anyone who knows me knows that's a pretty common trait for me. So it just brought up some good questions or good ideas in my mind. The first thing that came to me was like, okay, but what about when it's not a warning? What about those times when the match is stopped and nothing happens? And this is one of the things where we know the umpire committees typically they don't like the referee stopping the match too often and then saying nothing happened, because then why did you stop the match? That's the first part of it. But in the event of a clash, we don't necessarily want to be giving warnings or holding fouls. Sometimes people just end up chest to chest, they clinch, and all that the referees actually want to do is break, get them apart. So if rather than stopping and giving a signal and then resuming the match, it could just be a case of the referee saying break, everyone steps back one step, and then there's a signal and continue. So maybe it's reducing the break, not having a signal in between, just a verbal break. And once the separation has happened, get up and we can continue again. So that was the first thing that came to mind. Maybe we could have something that's just a verbal that doesn't require the full separation, the formality of it, and just has the similar kind of like spreading that you'd have in boxing or maybe kickboxing, continuous and continue. So like apart, go. So maybe something along those lines. And then the second thing that came to me, and I think actually is something that we could probably implement more easily within our rules, is the concept of playing advantage like you might in rugby or football. So in other words, there's a clash and someone kicks to the back, but we let the action develop to see if someone has gained any advantage or disadvantage for it. And what it might do is it might say, hey, you can't just take a warning to avoid getting scored on. So that might be the first thing. And the second thing that it might allow you to do then is have a look at the idea of it gives the referee a moment to say, hey, was that even relevant? So if we let play continue, and then we can do just as you would in football or rugby, you bring it back to the spot where the infraction happened. If we need to, like if after 3 or 4 seconds of play, nothing developed out of it, okay, we'll go back and we'll give the warning. But if play develops, well, we can let it develop and then we can come onto it. So I think that would be something really interesting to test out and see if we could do something with the concept of playing advantage. So, if someone is coming into contact with hands, they get a kick to the back on the way in. Well, it might be very nice to the person who is being rushed that the referee stops and gives the warning for the kick to the back. Now I suffer a warning, but if advantage had been allowed to play, the other person might have managed to continue, get into the hands and get a head score, take up space in the ring, maybe force an exit. So I don't bother giving the warning for the kick to the back because it didn't result in any advantage. I didn't, it didn't stop or break the action. So I think if we approach the thing from the whole point of view of encouraging continuity and score getting or attempting to get scores rather than, kicking the ball out of play, as it were, something like that to avoid trouble. That's the kind of thing where if are playing for advantage, let the match continue and let it benefit the person who had the attacking play in particular. I think that could be quite good. It's just something to explore maybe a little bit further.
I like that idea, and like exploring it as well. Maybe we could have particular tournaments where we trial things like this, and maybe it's a shambles, it doesn't work, and we're like, okay, let's not put this into the ITF rules. But then maybe you can use it as a test case as well, as a case study to say, okay, this might be something that we could look at. So yeah, maybe that's the poll for this week. Check it out there in our community. We'll see what you guys think about that and discuss it next week. But I think that's a good idea. So hope you enjoyed this week's analysis. We'll get stuck into another one again next week, and hopefully we can catch you in that episode.
Excellent. See you then. Bye-bye.